With Nintendo's September Direct having shown off a healthy mix of first and third party entries, we got our very first look at the latest Fire Emblem entry. Titled Fortune's Weave, we're going back to the Three Houses universe, so before we have 8 more years of discourse, let's revel in the hype of a brand new entry and go full analysis mode. Hey everyone, it's Yggdrasiel, and today it is my pleasure to analyze and speculate on the very first trailer we've seen for Fortune's Weave. Already with quite a little bit to discuss, all in a positive light, I assure you. I'll start with a full analysis and also occasionally dip into a little bit of my own personal speculation and thoughts. But now, just before we begin, as always, if you enjoy this video, please feel free to leave it a like, let me know what you think in the comments down below, and subscribe for more Fire Emblem, Nintendo, and general RPG content. Now with all of that said, we got a bit to discuss, so let's get stuck in. Just before we start with the trailer proper, it's important to note that this entry has different names in some regions of the world. In Japan and Korea, Fortune's Weave is actually a riot of color. Hailing from a Chinese idiom is the literal expression of 10,000 purples, 10,000 reds. In a more metaphorical state, it simply alludes to a diversity of forms and a state of prosperity. The Chinese version of this game is titled Thousands of Threads, with a similar expressive meaning to the Japanese title. I bring up this because it will tie into something we will see later on in this game. This expansive trailer opens up to the sights of a gorgeous port town riddled with waterways and what appear to be either aqueducts or elevated highways. The Greco-Roman inspiration is on full display between the architecture and stylings, and it's really fascinating to see several potential areas of interest already in this single shot. Between wharfs which we will be able to traverse in-game, to many large structures that could serve as areas of interest throughout our journey. From a waterside arena, open grounds amidst a courthouse with what could potentially be a guillotine, or other large similar structures that are rife with possibility for storytelling to take place. There are also plenty of open areas like these rocky wild spots for us to wage combat in, but of course this is all just the beginning as we transition to where the largest paths seemingly converge. A grand coliseum whose interior had me fooled into thinking this was the Arena Ferox of Fire Emblem Awakening. The camera pans to 2 esteemed figures patiently and sternly looking on. I get the sense that these individuals are renowned warriors, or perhaps their garbs allude to nobility, perhaps even both. But then a chiseled proclaimer comes on to quell the roars of the crowds. As of now, we know this fellow only as the Divine Sovereign, who has gathered the masses to announce an event known as the Heroic Games, a competition where the strengths and beliefs of various challengers will clash. At this point, I'd like to also let you know that I will be using information from a topics article by Nintendo Japan providing additional character tidbits. We have thanks to Serenus Forest for compiling and presenting the info, linked down below in the description. As for our friend on screen, perhaps the most obvious signs of a Fire Emblem being with an imposing presence and elven ears who also happens to be called the Divine Sovereign, this being is almost certainly a dragon god overseeing the realm of this game. While there are many attributes linking this game with Three Houses, and knowing that there are green-haired beings called Nabateans that have draconic forms, is this individual also Nabatean, that being born from Sothis, or does he bear a similar power and authority to Sothis, serving as a progenitor god of this region? As he calls for warriors to draw upon their strength for the upcoming challenges, we cycle into the first shots of our 4 main focal characters: Sai, Theodora, Dietrich, and Leda. First up is our lad Sai, or perhaps it's pronounced Kai, who seems to have fallen and stumbled into some trouble. Sporting curled, dark purple hair and donning simple yet colorful commoner's attire, he is listed as a youth from the countryside who ended up joining the Heroic Games in order to save his father's life. Man, what a twist, having a father figure set to perish. Surely no other Fire Emblem protagonist has had to suffer such a fate. Well, in any case, Sai is known to fight with a lance and can also ride upon a tamed avian-like beast called an Orneus, which can apparently also take flight. He also, shocker, will have some form of power which emanates from his palms, more on that later. From some initial glimpses into segments of the trailer, it seems that Sai already has made friends with a bespectacled young woman as he looks at the festivities from overhead. From our first looks at gameplay, we can confirm that Sai is playable in the overworld, taking a stroll along a bazaar set outside of some prominent-looking buildings. But wait, what's this? The single largest upgrade in Fire Emblem history. Do my eyes deceive me? No, they don't! Enhanced fruit that isn't simply a texture. My word, we really are in the Switch 2 era. But excuse my excitement. In any case, walking up these stairs towards a statue of what appears to be the Divine Sovereign himself, we can glimpse that should the Sovereign ever take up arms, he would bear an imposing lance at his side. Alas, we can't get any closer imagery of this, but we do lead on into our first glimpse of combat and the game's primary UI. So with this, it's time to dissect what information we have presented to us. The map type being shown to us here is a mixture of ground terrain with some stone obstructions. We can see that each terrain type will contribute to provide certain bonuses, but regular ground terrain will not do anything for our avoidability. Any weather effects will be displayed in the bottom left corner of the screen. This isometric view of the battlefield is also well reflected in the isometric view of this map. At the top left of the screen, we can see the name, class, level, primary stats, and currently equipped weapon of our selected unit. It's interesting to note that Sai has a gauge to the right of his level. Although it appears full, segments of this gauge will actually glow in other parts of the trailer, leading me to believe that this gauge will be central to using special arts and abilities during combat when either certain weapons are equipped or when certain abilities are utilized. This gauge fills with counters of Curse or of Blaze. It is my speculation that Curse counters will be applied from certain normal attacks or through combat arts, and Blaze counters will be applied when a Blaze art is used. I would also like to point out the colors of the Blaze gauge, initially equal parts purple and red that can overtake one another. This ties back to the inspirations behind the title of Fortune's Weave in Japan and Korea, Riot of Color, which was inspired by the idiom expressing thousands of purple, thousands of red. It's a bit on the nose to have the title of the game expressing prosperity at the expense of characters that can utilize abilities at the cost of their own health. Back to the combat UI though, one other cool detail is that we can swap the weapons our units wield during the planning stage with the use of the left and right bumpers, so we don't need to go into a submenu and change and speculate what the results might be before we choose to strike. As the action is selected, the screen pans out a little bit to give us a little more detail of this particular battlefield. We note friendly allies in blue through the minimap, though some health bars appear to be green as well, but this minimap seemingly marks these ones as safe in this instance. Our fellow challenger Dietrich is also there, sword in hand, as well as our bespectacled friend of Sai's wielding a tome. But we can also see some allies as well, wielding crossbows, tomes, swords, and bare fists. There's also one other key aspect spotted by Poirts_FEH on X, formerly known as Twitter, observing that the base of the statue has the crest of Fraldarius etched upon it. Carried by the member of the 10 elites of the same name, the crest of Fraldarius is inspired of the tarot card The Emperor, a sign of unyielding and commanding authority, leading me to be all the more curious of the being the statue upon it represents. As Sai enters position, we get a look at some of the options we can take after movement. There are options to perform a normal attack, look at our items, peruse storage, or simply wait, and mounted units will also have the option to dismount as well. In addition to our regular attacks, units can also strike out with Blaze and combat arts. Blaze arts push the limit of your character at the cost of their own health, while combat arts will likely work similar to Three Houses, providing extra strength at the cost of your weapon's durability. And yes, durability is returning as we can see through the next menu upon selecting attack. It's cool to see that even bronze type weapons will still bear some kind of special attribute. In this case, the spear will have boosted efficiency against mounted units. On top of displaying its durability and attributes, we can also see that certain actions, or perhaps even weapons, will have the chance to apply Curse, utilizing the same symbol as the gauge I mentioned earlier, which for now I want to call the Weave gauge. We know that the relic weapons, or at least weapons similar in appearance, are returning in this game, and I can't think of anything more cursed to wield in combat in a Fire Emblem game than the bones and cartilage of a massacred non-human race. In similar fashion to relic weapons, crests will also be making a prominent return as the final menu before entering actual combat against the charioteer shows Sai bearing his own crest. It's also a crest we know of, though a very vague one at that, the Crest of Aubin, named after one of the 4 apostles of Seros. Aside from the apostle of the same name, the only other known character wielding this crest was Yuri, and it was defined in Three Houses as being a crest long lost to history, occasionally preventing the wielder from suffering counterattacks while wielding a weapon. The Crest of Aubin is also based upon the tarot card of the Hanged Man, symbolizing self-sacrifice. Was this simply chosen to highlight an air of mystery around Sai himself, certainly as there are some unknowns about him later on in this trailer? Only time will tell. Lastly, in this menu, we can also see that Sai has the option of attacking with an additional weapon, or perhaps this slot is intended for items. It may also just be likely a slot for gambits to be utilized, as we can see from our next character's combat segment. And while this scene then leads into its combat cutscene, there is one final detail of interest spotted by Lunal Celeste on X, formerly known as Twitter. A giant statue looms over the battlefield and can be seen holding the severed heads of 2 figures. The sharp ears and appearances have some feeling that this is a representation of a warrior, such as Nemesis standing tall and parading a slain Sothis, or similarly appearing Nabatean. And I sincerely hope that this detail is discussed further in the game, especially as this figure stands upon a foundation etched with the crest of Fraldarius. Our second warrior introduced is the fierce noblewoman Theodora. With a powerful army at her disposal, she herself is a tall and imposing figure, taking to the field of her own strength and able to take on several armored enemies with but a single strike. In combat, she has the ability to launch attacks with the support of her army. It seems as though the Gambit system is returning, but there is suspicion that this may in fact be an option unique to Theodora or to allies under her command. Clad in gladiatorial gear enmeshed with prominent bone and bearing a headpiece of draconic horns, Theodora is as steadfast in her beliefs of strength as she is fierce in combat herself. She seeks great strength that will not yield against any foe, one that will allow her to uphold her faiths, and most importantly, a strength that will see her reign as a proper queen. This steadfastness in beliefs and the desire to seek power has many reminded of the motives behind one Miss Edelgard. But of course, we have to see more of this character before jumping to conclusions. Isn't that right, Internet? Her class is that of a noble, and she wields a weapon titled Mahadu's Spear. In Theodora's combat presentation, we can get a glimpse of a few rugged allies standing alongside her as she swings with the disturbing strike Gambit Art, easily slashing against 3 opponents with but a single strike, true to her description by Nintendo of Japan. Disturbing Strike can lash out at all in front of Theodora and immobilizes all that she successfully strikes. The third challenger holds a lot of intrigue for many, myself included, as Dietrich or Dietrich or however you want to pronounce it right now, takes to the field with what almost appears to be a relic weapon at his side. This enigmatic Myrmidon wields a blade known as the Answerer, and seems to have joined the heroic games in order to lay waste to an unknown fiend that only can be culled by his blade. The Nintendo Japan topic article notes that he often speaks in a detached manner, but his words are often interpreted as aggressive and sharp. His fair looks remind many of Alucard from the Castlevania series, and his closest resemblances that I can think of in this Fire Emblem universe are Yuritsa and Mercedes, though his singular ambition also seems to remind people of Dimitri. In Dietrich's combat cutscene, we can see some new faces as well, most prominently this lance-wielding blue-haired girl. As for Dietrich himself, we get our first look at the Blaze Art menu. With costs of up to as much as 22 points of health, we see Dietrich utilize the Moving Shadow Blaze Art, allowing him to warp up to 3 spaces away, even over otherwise impassable terrain. Utilizing Moving Shadow awards 1 Blaze Point, which we can see be applied to the gauge over the purple segment. After the completion of Moving Shadow, Dietrich can engage in combat with either a base attack or a combat art. Dietrich's primary weapon, the Answerer, is considered a magical sword counted among the hero's relics, and allows for the use of the bloodletting combat art. With the confirmation of a hero's relic, and with earlier verification of the spreading and inheritance of crests, we know for sure that this game takes place after the events of the massacre of the Nabateans at Xanadu, though it's still unclear as to where it places compared to the events of Three Houses. Dietrich is also seemingly a magic wielder, seen carrying a Levin sword as well as being able to wield a unique weapon called Flisa that can deal extra damage against what I assume is the icon for armored infantry. In the final combat menu before the combat animation takes place, we can verify that Dietrich bears his own crest, the Crest of Lamine, further tying his connections to Yritza and Mercedes, who also bear that crest. The Crest of Lamine is based upon the tarot card of Judgment, so perhaps this poetically will tie into Dietrich's desire to seek out one particular foe and render judgment by his own blade. The last of our main challengers is the beautiful and eccentric Leda, whose ambition is spurned by revenge, seeking more than simply the death of a man that she despises so much. She refuses to die before she can exact her all-consuming vengeance. She captivates all with her dancing and can use instruments and songs in combat to summon demonic beasts to her side. There will be a cutscene that allows us to see her inability to intervene against whoever it is that takes away whatever is important to her, so perhaps the death of a family member or a close friend. She adorns herself with fine jewels and clothing fit for dancing, yet unlike a traditional dancer class in Fire Emblem, she dons the mantle of Hunter in combat. In this presentation of her in combat, we can see that she bears a weave gauge that is fully reddened and active, not a hint of purple in sight. With her combat options, Manage Gauge is grayed out. Perhaps her use of the weave gauge plays differently than other units, as her blaze abilities come at the expense of parts of the gauge itself as well, while still awarding blaze counters. Some of her blaze arts can only be used once per map, in this case playing the Song of Beasts and bringing forth an allied demonic beast onto the battlefield. In both Dietrich's critical strike following his blaze art, and with Leda's summoning, purple auras encompass their animations. Leda's instrument itself is adorned with purple line work as part of its design. In Fire Emblem Three Houses, demonic beasts were once people who either willingly or unwillingly transformed as a result of their inability to wield the blood of crests, or by trying to forcefully unlock the true power of a hero's relic while being incompatible in wielding it. It will be interesting to see if there's any deviation or addition to the rule to the beasts that Leda summons forth. But with that, the gameplay segments of the trailer end, though we still have a little bit more to speculate on. Following our combat scenes are some last snippets to get us excited for the main story. We start off with Sai's friend likely being in danger during the events of the Colosseum bout from his gameplay scene. Sai, adamant on keeping his friend safe, channels a purple sigil from the palm of his left hand. We can catch a snippet of this scene before the sigil flares, noting that Sai seems to have a mark or a rune resting naturally on his palm. Although we don't know anything about this power, and I'm going to assume that Sai likely won't as well, I believe whatever this power is, it may likely have something to do with the Crest of Aben, or perhaps is a power bestowed upon those who can use the weave gauge. We don't have any footage of any other playable unit, and enemies shown in this presentation don't have gauges of their own, so this may be specific to a handful of people, including Sai. I also want to take a moment to appreciate just how clean this texture is. No rugged or jagged lines, no low resolution, just very clean with a nice animation to match. Two gladiators fight amongst one another in the next scene, and it's our unmasked friend that has a lot of eyes placed upon him. Some people are going so far as to speculate this is someone related to, or is possibly Nemesis himself, though much of the evidence already presented would deny this. Dietrich wields the Answerer against a nobleman, saying warm blood is now served in a cruel cup. As that scene is followed by him then fighting off an individual we actually already caught a glimpse of during Sai's combat footage. Although she was certainly fighting barefisted back then, she seems to have a new arm in this scene, literally having a weapon in the shape of a gun, simply using the sides of it to deflect blows from a full-on hero's relic. It's interesting to note that it can fire off sparks, and half of one side of the weapon bears a whole bunch of symbols, so perhaps instead of a full-on actual gun, it's some newfangled magic channeling device in the shape of one. Next up, a green-haired male figure is thrown to the side in a fight against a masked character adorned with scale armors and a feline mask. Some of the fabric adorning this character is also interestingly similar to that of Sai's, but the most important detail of this unnamed character is that the pendant around their neck bears the crest of Noah, yet another crest from one of the four apostles. The crest of Noah is based upon the tarot card of the Hierophant, known for serving as a bridge or allowing for the congregation of people they trust into a place of holiness or knowledge, so perhaps this character exists to impart some form of wisdom onto a primary character. But this crest now has me thinking. The four apostles exiled themselves across southern Fodlan after their dismissal. We can infer from the similar cloth materials that this character and Sai could be from the same area, and if Nintendo Japan's article's words are to be fully believed, these two characters then can also be inferred of as being from southern Fodlan, or where the Yggdrasiel Empire would once be. This lends more credence to the game being a sequel to the main story events of Three Houses, though of course we don't know at what point or if this is a new era entirely, well after the events of that game. There are also allusions made to the land this game takes place in to be further south than the Yggdrasian lands, with hinting from the Japanese trailer of the game mentioning Dagda, Shamir's land, even further southwest than Brigid. It is a massive landmass that greatly stretches from the north all the way to the south. But let's move on before this becomes a bit of a pinpointing headache trying to figure these things out. On to our next scene, where Leda asks a challenger why she should let him deny her her own feelings. With a sharp fierceness in her eyes, she strikes at the white-haired gladiator we saw earlier on. Is this the same man that she has sworn out for revenge, or is that line simply a red herring, being presented over what would otherwise be her normal fighting spirit? A dark crypt takes hold of the next scene transition as who we presume is Theodora looks upward at a figure seated upon a throne, a golden glow emanating from up top and showing off that this individual's body is laden with weapons. Given that we cannot see much of this character's silhouette, save for the faintest hint that his hair color may be similar to that of Theodora's, I wonder if this figure's tragic tale is the reason for Theodora's fervent desire for strength, as this scene leads to a sweeping shot of her ordering the command to fire off a gargantuan volley of arrows. While Sai has done something wrong, or is more than likely being framed for something and gets held down by some guardsmen, while Dietrich readies his weapon, as Leda dances with a wry grin upon her face, and as Theodora sternly is escorted to her destination, the Divine Sovereign has one last proclamation. For those who stand upon the final stage, he shall grant whatever wish is desired. So says he, the Divine Sovereign, as the main cutscenes end with the parade along the Colosseum grounds, and the title of Fortune's Weave appears on screen. However, that is not to be the end of this trailer, as the all-too-familiar, charming voice of one Cassandra Lee Morris rings out, and as our fade in from black leads to a sight we have seen before. The years have been long, and age has been all too kind to the progenitor god Sothis, no longer childlike in form, but a full woman grown, and with the aura of a full-fledged dragon god that we have come to recognize time and time again in Fire Emblem. Asking if we've forgotten her so soon, she rises slowly from her throne before we are left in the dark for a final time as this trailer truly concludes. Could she be speaking to one who bears her heart and blood, a descendant of Byleth perhaps? Or is it perhaps Sai? Our answers won't be revealed for some time, as Fire Emblem Fortune's Weave is set to release sometime in 2026. But that is all for this video. Thank you all very much for tuning on into this analysis, my first foray into Fire Emblem analysis and speculation. If you enjoyed what I had to say and would like to see more, please let me know in the comments down below. But with all of that said, once again, thank you very much, and until next time, I hope that you all have a great day.